Hello, and welcome to the Evolve and Elevate podcast. I am Jacob Fry, your show host and humble servant. I have an unwavering belief that no matter where you are, who you are, what you have, or what the story of your past may hold, you have the ability and inner strength to design and realize your best self tomorrow, if only you will put in the effort today. And welcome back to another episode of the Evolve and Elevate podcast. Today, before we jump back into silver linings, I'd like to read a little passage out of Deepak Chopra's The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. Deepak states, "We know we've become part of the cosmic plan when the universe upholds and supports us. Self-exploration isn't a task we accomplish and then abandon. Every person is a never-ending project of the universe." In my simple mind, this means no matter what we've achieved or what has derailed us, we should always move forward knowing that what we have learned or are going to learn will take us to the point in time and the place and space that we are meant to be in, as we are an always unfolding project of the universe. And I hope that resonates with you, knowing that you are an always unfolding and always developing and always growing project of the universe. Chapter titled Order of Protection. The first thing I did after getting settled at the trailer was to apply for an emergency order of protection for us. With the bruising and the previous notion of violence from Fierce's boyfriend, I was not going to remain idle. I was also concerned that Fierce might get our daughter while I was working, leaving no lawful recourse for myself. The judge rejected my emergency protection order request, reasonably stating that it wasn't fair to not get more information from the other party involved. During the hearing, I was able to give a more in-depth explanation of the variables around the situation. The judge was much more concerned, but still wanted to give Fierce the opportunity to defend herself. He postponed the case once more, and another hearing was scheduled. Fierce came with an attorney to defend her case, but at this time there was an additional piece of information from the plaintiff, which was myself. Fierce had just been released from jail prior to the hearing. Her boyfriend also had an encounter with the law that supported my application for the order of protection. With the new information, the judge signed the 2-year protection order, which included visitation rights for Fierce that I had written in her favor. No parent should ever be withheld the right to see their child. I personally had experienced that while she was staying at her boyfriend's home. There's something about experiencing a specific type of suffering that makes you unwilling to inflict it on others. It caused unrelated emotional pain, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Despite having weekend rights, Fierce would not visit our daughter for the next couple of years. She had decided to focus on her own life. Silver linings. Empathy is something I believe all humans are capable of. In this case, the golden rule plays a role. Do not do unto others that which you would not have them do to you. Chapter titled Trailer Life. The trailer was one of the worst units in the trailer park. It was falling apart, both outside and within. There was insulation hanging out on the outside of the walls. Inside, the floor had holes in it, and it was stripped down to the plywood. It was not the most sanitary living. With Grandpa owning a dog, the dog was not house-trained properly. I often found myself cleaning the trailer, even as the only one in the unit with a job. The trailer itself cost Grandpa a little less than $3,000, and he paid $150 a month in lot rent. My daughter and I lived in the trailer for a little over a year. While living there, Grandpa charges $300 a month in quote-unquote rent. I didn't mind because I was simply happy to have a roof over my head. We had a 10-foot by 10-foot room that my daughter and I shared. It was a tight fit, but I never once complained, even as the only one in the trailer paying quote-unquote rent. Over my time there, not only did I cover the lot rent, but I also imagine I likely paid the unit purchase price in full. Silver linings. Things may get bad, but no matter how bad they get, we can always find something to be grateful for. If nothing else, gratitude for the ability to simply experience experiences. It's much deeper than it sounds. We must additionally recognize that on a planet of 7 billion, someone, somewhere is struggling more. We must pick up ourselves so we can find them and help lift them up. Chapter titled Life Lessons as a DSP. While living in Quincy this go-around, I was 18. I had just earned my GED. Grandpa had a friend, whom I later found out was selling drugs to, who worked at a local care center for individuals with learning disabilities. These were centers where either the state or families funded the center to care for disabled adults. She set me up with an interview for a DSP role. A DSP is also known as Direct Service Personnel. In its simplest form, it is a CNA without the CNA certification. I personally didn't mind what the work was. I was eager to get to work and have funds. Looking forward to purchasing my daughter and I much needed items. On a side note, I will admit that my daughter and I were getting food stamps and Medicare during this time. I never enjoyed being on welfare, but I am immensely grateful for a government that provides this for those who do need it. It truly made a colossal difference in sustaining our lifestyle, or survival in general, at that point in time. I did great during the interview, and the position was offered to me the following day. Their team was excited to get an extra pair of hands on site. Within a week of my background, drug screen, and the required TB test, I began my first day as a DSP. Having experienced a healthcare role firsthand, I can wholeheartedly say that those that work within the field are freaking superheroes. I learned so many valuable life lessons during my relatively short time as a DSP that it is hard to express my overwhelming gratitude for the experience. During my first day on site, I was introduced to a myriad of awesome individuals. The center I worked in had less than 10 beds, so I was able to bond with many of those there. One gentleman, R, was blind and had the mental level of a 9-year-old. R was in the normal retirement age range for our society, but always behaved like it was recess time in 2nd grade. He had a wild spark for life. Every day and everything was an adventure for him. He would get giddy while listening to baseball on the radio, with zero cares as to who was playing or winning. R may have held that form of a grandfather, but he chirped with the spirit and imagination of a creative child. R was the only resident in the center able to speak coherently. M, another older gentleman, had the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. He understood emotions, gestures, his name, but little else. One of his intense characteristics was his immeasurable energy. Imagine a man in his 60s, rolling around, giggling, picking his nose, and not having a single care in the world. That's him. Others in the house were wheelchair or bedridden due to their physical and mental limitations they struggled with from birth. As a DSP, my job was to dress, bathe, feed, entertain, do laundry, and monitor the residents. There were usually a couple of DSPs at the house in addition to an RN to issue medication when needed. So, the life lessons, you ask. While working in the home, I was first and foremost humbled. Many there had never been given the gift of mobility or the ability to learn, read, or even speak. All things I had taken for granted every day of my life. I very quickly had a newfound appreciation for the basic functions and senses I am able to enjoy every day. Running, reading, singing, smelling, comprehending, dancing, and more all mean so much more when you truly imagine life without them. I found an empathetic muscle I had never used much prior to being a DSP. Others tackle so much more than we will ever know on the outside looking in. I learned to never judge a book by its cover. I repeatedly learned the importance of patience. There is simply no wrestling a grown man into clothes if he isn't ready to wake up. You cannot change a full diaper while the one being changed is attempting to do the worm. And if you don't know what the worm is, Google the worm dance. You never take a sunset from someone who is engulfed in it. You simply sit, take a deep breath, and slow down the area in your mind that pushes you to always be moving. I learned to appreciate the little things. R was a huge proponent of bringing out the child within me, and I still thank him often in thought for that priceless gift. R would get so excited about the little things. A walk outside, a song on the radio, the warm sun on his face. Despite being blind, R had the most intense facial expressions, the largest smiles, and a true chirp of gratitude for life that came out in his words. R once gifted me a small toy soldier. He was so happy to surprise me with it, I naturally expressed overwhelming appreciation. I keep the toy soldier on my office desk as a regular reminder. Don't lose your inner child, your imagination, or your sense of adventure. Always keep that piece of you with you, and all things, every little thing, can be gigantic. R's catchphrase has been a staple in my life ever since I left that center. Quote, "I'm just happy to be here." Unquote. Silver linings. Don't judge a book by its cover. We often have the habit, or at least I have had the habit, of judging events or people based on our personal bias. We don't truly know what is going on under the social mask that others wear, and it is never safe to assume. Be patient. If you don't slow down to smell the flowers occasionally, you might just get some poop on you. Literally. Stay grateful. Appreciate your senses. Appreciate the little things. The fact that you could read these words is a true miracle. Or hear these words in case of the podcast. Never forget that others are brought into and taken out of this world without even being given an opportunity to appreciate those things we each take for granted. Keep a piece of your inner child with you, always. Chapter titled Upward and Onward. While I loved working from home, I was unable to financially make ends meet there. Working minimum wage, $8.25 an hour at the time, and less than full-time was not survivable. My average weekly take-home there was around $200 a week after taxes. Unfortunately, having to bid farewell to my friends at the home, I moved into a career path. I had landed a position as a tire and lube technician at Walmart's Tire Center. Following several onboarding videos, I was introduced to my new coworkers. They were an interesting bunch. If you have ever worked at a supercenter, everyone is interesting, to say the least. Yet, I still got along with each one of them. While at Walmart, I learned a valuable lesson regarding failure. Silver linings. Being a friendly person and befriending others has been a staple for me in my career growth. Strong working relationships and professional networking will lead to numerous opportunities. Chapter titled Flat Tire. The learning curve was more like a learning cliff at Walmart. I was thrown in with zero training outside of the safety videos, and interestingly enough, sink or swim became a pattern through my career. My first task was a flat tire repair on a little Beetle car. I was eager to prove myself. I pulled it in, I put it on the lift, and took the wheel off of the vehicle. I had seen others do it and was following the steps I was given. Quote, pull the car in, take the tire off, put it in the dip tank, unquote. It was pretty straightforward. I used the tire machine to pull the tire off the rim. I took the tire to the dip tank, which was used to find leaks. The idea was to dip the tire into the tank and find the leak through the visual of bubbles of air escaping from the tire. I couldn't find the leak and asked a coworker for assistance. My coworker came over, he looked at the tire, he looked at me, he looked at the tire, looking back at me. He burst into laughter and began calling for the service manager. The manager came over, and through gasps of air and tears, my coworker pointed at the tire, the dip tank, and at me. The manager apparently immediately picked up the joke I was missing. Collecting himself, the manager explained to me, in as pleasant a manner as possible, the tire needed to be on the rim with air in it to find the leak. And I had a eureka moment, and I couldn't believe what I was doing. I had removed the rubber from the rim and was twirling a tire with no air inflation around in the dip tank. I burst into laughter myself, and I thanked them as I went back to the tire machine to remount the tire. The lesson I learned here was twofold. Always learn from your mistakes. I assure you I never made that mistake again. And do not hesitate to laugh at yourself. Silver linings. The ability to accept criticism with a growth mindset and to truly learn from mistakes is priceless. Chapter titled Time to Move On. I spent the next stint I lived at Grandpa's working at Walmart. I thoroughly enjoyed working in the shop. It's difficult to find the shop smell anywhere else. There are not many places that smell like warm oil and burnt rubber. Had external factors not pushed me away from Quincy, it is difficult to say how long I might have worked in that role. I had become comfortable with the day-to-day, but more and more events kept cropping up that made me wake up to the need to leave the city. Mom had been sent to the Department of Corrections for another drug charge. Grandpa was making a living selling pain medication that was prescribed to him, suffering through physical pain in exchange for the little amount of quote-unquote freedom that cash offered. I had no friends at the time. One acquaintance that I had worked with at Walmart quit the job soon after I lent him my GPS, and he never returned it. My daughter wasn't happy, and I was often bickering with her cousin due to being cramped up in the trailer. My brother was stagnating, spending his days in front of a computer LCD screen playing video games, and I knew deep down if we did not get away from that city, our lives would be consumed the same way I'd seen it consume others. I made a judgment call to move back to the area our dad raised us in. We moved from the trailer in Quincy into a trailer on Memory Lane. It was extremely cost effective. The trailer lot rent was only $800 a year, and the unit itself was practically free. It was on the river, and water was pulled from an underground well. Me, my brother, and my daughter settled into life on Memory Lane fairly well. At a previous time in my life, I had not heeded bad omens. When the universe starts inserting red flags into our lives, we must pay attention. Chapter titled The Straw That Broke My Back. As we moved into the trailer, it seemed everyone else was falling apart. FM had been sent to prison, Mom was in prison, and Grandpa was also sentenced to prison for selling his medication. Luckily, we had seen the writing on the wall in Quincy, and I was grateful we acted on it. It was time to focus on ourselves, and we needed a life change. I needed a life change. I had put on an extreme amount of weight over the last few years. I weighed more than 350 pounds. I was a single parent, a high school dropout that barely earned his GED. I was broke and living check to check in a trailer. I had no goals. I had no plan. We traveled to food pantries to keep food on the table. We would scrounge for change to go to the laundromat. We didn't have our own vehicle. I felt like a failure. I felt like I was failing my daughter. I refused to fail my daughter. I made a promise in that trailer that I would do whatever it took to improve myself and elevate my family. The next year would be one of the toughest uphill battles I'd ever faced. Silver linings. There may be times in our lives in which we feel suffocated by our life results. I've heard some call it a midlife crisis. I've heard others call it a mental breakdown. When we reach that point, we have two options: give in or fight forward. Chapter titled Trailer Transformation. I started then and there to turn my life around. I wasn't sure where to start, so I began with what I knew. I searched YouTube for things like how to improve my life and how to earn more money. I found a wealth of material on YouTube that penetrated my soul. Oddly as that may sound. I found Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Les Brown, Wayne Dyer, Bob Proctor, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, John Maxwell, and so many more individuals that shared methods, strategies, and pathways to improve my life. I was at a point in my life where I was ready to fight for change. I stopped blaming others and took ownership for my life. I picked up sayings such as, quote, "For things to change, you have to change," unquote, from Jim Rohn. We are not trees, and we do not have to stay in one place. We are not ducks, and we do not have to fly south. We get to choose our path. No one else decides for us. Things that are easy to do are also easy not to do. It all depends on our discipline, motivation, and goals. After all, without goals, the next 10 years are going to be a lot like the last 10 years, and I was not about to let that happen. I listened to all that was available daily. Tony Robbins, from a struggling home to a powerhouse businessman that helped others selflessly. Wayne Dyer, from the struggles of a foster home to a respected educator and a world-renowned author that helped millions, including myself. Les Brown, also navigating a tough childhood, chose to transform himself into a world-class public speaker. Brian Tracy, from low-level labor roles to the best-selling author. Bob Proctor, janitor to millionaire. Zig Ziglar, from suffering sales to sales master. The names varied, the styles varied, but the message to me was universal. Anyone from anywhere can change their external environment if they work to change their internal environment. I understood that at a very surreal level. I got a library card and began reading nonfiction and technical books for free. I followed the advice of several of these giants and used my free time to listen to audiobooks and just simply learn. I began doing fitness videos from YouTube and eating healthier. I was riding a bicycle everywhere I went, stretching regularly. I did everything in my personal power to begin building myself up day by day. Soon things began looking up. I landed a position at a local steer source as an automotive tech. I was working full-time and learned much while there. I learned how to do alignments, brakes, alternators, and more. I even purchased a large toolbox. Not a regular toolbox, a large toolbox. I took a leap, and I applied to community college. I initially failed to test into college-level courses and was told to try again after, quote, brushing up on my skills, unquote. I began a personal regimen of math and English studies. I went to the library. I requested workbooks that I would make copies of. I completed several basic math study guides cover to cover. My next attempt at testing, I qualified for entry-level college courses. With the help of the Pell Grant, I was able to start college studies. I started slow, working full-time, and raising my daughter. I didn't want to overwhelm myself. Before I knew it, I was a full-time student in addition to being a full-time father and a full-time employee. The positivity of the mentors I found within videos, books, and audiobooks all compounded into what I can only define as personal happiness. I was making and chasing progress. As Tony Robbins says, progress equals happiness. I became, and have been since, a, quote, self-improvement weirdo, unquote. The guy that gets weird looks from the normal people. Ever since this change of mindset in my life, I approached the day-to-day differently. I would jog with steel-toe boots on during my lunch break in wintertime. I turned down nights and weekends out in favor of study. Instead of blasting music in the car, I blasted audiobooks. I removed sugar from my diet entirely for more than a year. I took my physical training more seriously and started going to the gym regularly. Physical activity became a source of stress relief rather than a source of stress. But despite all of my internal focused growth, the external world still lobbed curveballs. Silver linings. It is important to know that where to start is not as important as simply starting. Personal ownership of all of our life results is one of the first barriers to true transformation. We must take ownership of our results. Failures are an inevitable precursor to success. Do not be a perfectionist, be a failure conqueror. Chapter titled Sears Closes. I was in my third semester working on a criminal justice degree when I found out. The store was closing, along with many other stores across the nation. It was a devastating blow for me, but much more for others. Store management called a store huddle and pulled everyone on the shift that morning together. In a monotone voice with zero emotion, warning, or even an attempt to soften the news. Quote, "Our store will be ceasing operations this October," unquote. The manager, through the tears of the employees, continued on to inform the team of the closing plan, a staged, quote, "everything must go," unquote, sale, in which the store would offer increasing discounts as the closing date moved closer. There was zero talk for appreciation for years of service, nothing about the effort of the employees, zero words for those impacted. The entire store was issued its termination with no warning and no humanity. I felt so terrible for the others there. Would they be all right? Surely they had families just as I did to support. I vowed to have a new job lined up before the store closed. It was July, so thankfully they gave everyone ample time to do job searches. One coworker suggested I visit a company that hired for companies needing assistance. Interesting dynamic, right? Within 2 weeks of going to this hiring company, they had offered me 3 different jobs. I turned down 2 and jumped at the third, one that would expand my current skill set, a diesel mechanic position. Silver linings. When accepting the responsibility of leadership, it is critical to be willing to help those you lead navigate bumpy terrain. Watching this leader break numerous colleagues' hearts without any apparent concern for the team impacted me significantly. Chapter titled Mack Trucks. The first day on the job should have been filled with red flags, from the cursing coworkers to the lack of smiles and the shunning of the new guys that had arrived. But again, at this time, I was a certified weirdo, and I was far too engulfed in enjoying life than to spare time concerned for negativity. I dropped off my tools, I got organized, and I reported for duty 30 minutes early. I was given menial tasks at first, such as cleaning the floors or helping other mechanics clean up their bays. I'm unsure if it was to gauge my ability or to gauge how thick my skin was. Either way, quote, "I was just happy to be here," unquote. As time passed, I learned an enormous amount about the trucking industry and diesel tractors themselves. From full-frame rebuilds to engine overhauls and electrical diagnostics, I was enthralled. I was convinced that being a diesel technician was my destiny. I trained for and earned several automotive service excellence certifications, also known as ASE certifications, for diesel repairs. I transferred into a diesel program at community college and brought the extra dealership hands from students seeking a career in my classes. Over the time there, I invested several arms and legs into my tools. I worked with a technician program teacher and got the dealership invited into a radio interview around hiring aspiring technicians through the community college. But, as there always seemed to be, someone was ready to try and knock me down a level or two. Silver linings. When I began my internal growth journey, external negativity did not stand a chance. Chapter titled, The Shop Bully. During my time in the shop, I learned as much about social behavior as I did about diesel mechanics. It was a tough lot in that shop. And if I had not been a little, quote, high on life, unquote, I am not so sure that I would have made it with them. Despite being ridiculed often for being the new guy or even the least experienced for quite some time, I would still buy the team Saturday breakfast and hand out Christmas cards. Yet there was one gentleman who always had something negative to say or had a hurtful joke ready to fly off his lips with zero contemplation. Again, it was a rougher than normal work atmosphere, and the daily cursing count was probably more than 100 plus. It was labor-intensive and often on filthy equipment. Consider crawling around under a trash truck as maggots fall into your face. With stressful unknown variables. Oh no, you just snapped a head bolt. Have fun drilling for an hour while being heckled. Nonetheless, I was making a couple of dollars more an hour than I was used to. As I mentioned, I would use what I considered extra income to bring the occasional batch of donuts or McDonald's buffet to the team. There is something about being the lowest on the social totem pole and bringing in smiles and gifts that people just simply do not know how to respond to. A few months of this and the bullying turned into, quote, talking shop, unquote. As time continued to pass, I continued to invest in my career as a diesel technician. I joined Mack's manufacturer technician training course, and I earned a dealership certification. I then set my eyes on the truck and industry's holy grail, a commercial driver's license. I saved up for nearly a year to pay for the CDL course at the community college. It cost nearly $4,000 to attend and had to be paid in advance. Silver linings. We must learn to navigate all types of personalities in the world. Many will be positive, but some will inevitably be negative. Learn to overwhelm the negative with positivity. Be the change you want to see. Responding with like will lead to like. Kill them with kindness. I have always found a true smile and compassion for others to nullify and render useless others' negative intentions with time. Chapter titled CDL Class. I invested my savings into the night CDL course at the college. For 2 months, Monday through Friday, after a 10-hour shift, I would spend 4 hours learning how to drive a tractor with a 53-foot trailer. I was blessed in several forms in this night course. As the only student, who wants to work on themselves from 5 to 9 p.m., me, obviously, I had the entire 4 hours to myself to learn how to drive. I, the truck, and the instructor who was doing nothing short of being awesome. He was a retired compliance manager for the private fleet of a large agribusiness well known in the area, ADM. He shared stories of his career and the value that truck drivers bring to the country. He was a trucker himself through and through, starting his career transporting goods for a potato chip company, quote, back in the day, unquote. I learned many important lessons from him, one of the gems being the value of being a good person and working with integrity. He had worked his entire life as a hard worker, a laborer, a driver, and eventually a manager. He was evidence that a man who works hard and takes care of his family wins in the end. He was a staple in the community, helping aspiring drivers learn how to navigate a commercial vehicle. He had retired with a boon of stock from the company and had enjoyed his job so much he didn't even know they offered a pension until he retired. Talk about a good gift for a good person. Being one-on-one every weekday for 2 months, our rapport grew significantly. Eventually, he suggested I consider working for ADM. At the time of the suggestion, I couldn't envision myself anywhere but back at the Mack dealership. But as time passed, a career change began to make more and more sense. ADM offered a 401k, a pension, health, dental, vision insurance, in addition to numerous other benefits I had never had in my past. The financial aspect of the comparison was a no-brainer, but what would I do with my tools? My schooling? I shelved the consideration for a while. Silver linings. Use earnings to invest in yourself often. The knowledge and skills learned from these experiences that require investment will often open up more doors in the future. I have also found that those items we spend our funds on are given more attention than those we do not. Chapter titled, Pushed in a New Direction. Not too long after earning my CDL, I approached the dealership manager to attempt to negotiate a pay raise. After all, a CDL was an important skill at a commercial vehicle dealership. But, as it turned out, it wasn't an important skill at this dealership. Not only did I not receive a raise, I had more jokes hurled at me. Here comes, quote, Big Rigger Jake, unquote. This pushed me to realize that I had already hit my glass ceiling at the shop. I applied with ADM, and I was hired within a couple of weeks of submitting the application. Within the next month, I had insurances, a retirement plan, and was making double the annual wage I was making as a mechanic. Talk about a level up. Silver linings. Know your worth, and do not ever let anyone decide your worth for you. If your skill sets have elevated you into being prepared for a higher paying role or made you worth more to the market, chase every penny you deserve. After accepting my worth and pivoting my career, I doubled my income in a couple of weeks. Invest in yourself. That $4,000 I invested in earning a new skill, the CDL, has brought me priceless returns through the years. I still hold my CDL as a valuable skill that will always be able to put food on the table. Chapter titled, Climbing the Corporate Ladder. I joined ADM as a truck driver in 2016. It was a brand new adventure, and I was beyond excited. The drivers at the terminal are union, and that was also a new experience. I spent a couple of months training with a professional driver trainer. As I had no experience driving outside of the lot on Mack, I had some serious learning to do. The trucking location hauled primarily liquid bulk shipments, from oil and sweetener to hazardous acid. Yeah, the kind that eats flesh. And we delivered it all over the nation. I have always been a, quote, workaholic, unquote, in the sense that I push to always go above and beyond. As Jim Rohn states, always do more than what you get paid for. It makes you a valuable person. I volunteered to work every Saturday. Meanwhile, others often complained if they had to work 2 in a row. 4 months at a time, I never complained. And I did any assignment that was given to me. While I was a driver, I was still attending school full-time. I pushed on to attend as a full-time student during my entire 5 years with the company. As a driver, I would go to study and do assignments while waiting to unload or while unloading. Pulling out my textbook, I would lay it and my notebook across the fender of the trailer while unloading the product. Luckily, the unloading process was passive. Hook up a hose, open a valve, turn on the pump, and let the good times roll. I picked up a habit called no extra time, NET, from Tony Robbins during this time in my life. No extra time is the idea of working on extra things into the time you already have committed elsewhere. While driving, I would dedicate this time to learning through audio courses and lectures. While unloading, I would study or complete textbook assignments. While working at ADM, driving, I listened to hundreds of hours of self-improvement and self-development audio lessons. It was truly my, quote, university on wheels, unquote, as so many high performers refer to it. If I was in line somewhere, I had a book in my hand, especially so when donating plasma. For years, I donated plasma twice a week at a local plasma collection bank. Over my donating life, I have given plasma more than 350 times. The process typically took a couple of hours, and I benefited immensely from the time. I read numerous books and studied several school chapters while donating plasma. It was an NET win, but also a personal win, helping others while improving myself. I loved driving, but deep down I desired more. I wanted to grow, and after about 9 months of driving full-time, an office position opened in the trucking terminal for a night dispatcher. The position posted stated a bachelor's degree was required, and I was still wrapping up an associate's, but I applied nonetheless. Silver linings. We must always bet on ourselves. Despite not having a college degree, I still had the confidence and belief that I would not only perform that role well, but I would get offered that role with enough preparation. Quote, no extra time, unquote, has been critical learning element through the last decade of my life. If I am commuting anywhere, I have an audiobook or audio lesson on. From languages to leadership, it is all available in an audio format. Benefit from it. When you pull into work and hear your colleagues' music on blast, smile knowing that the promotion will be yours. Chapter titled, Career Growth. I was called in for an interview. I take my career very seriously, and even though this was an entry-level position, I arrived wearing nice dress clothes fitted with a tie. I walked into the waiting room and sat down with others who were also interviewing for the role. I scanned the room, gauging the competition. Simply based on physical presentation alone, I was confident I had the job secured. Others were in jeans, polos, and unshaven. I had prepared and strongly desired this role. I was called in for the interview and sat down with the hiring manager and the human resources manager. Spending the previous week researching the role and preparing for role-specific interview questions, I crushed the interview. I was unstoppable, or at least felt that way. At the end of the interview, as I was walking out of the room, the hiring manager told me to stop. He had just now reviewed my resume. Quote, you drive for us? Unquote, he asked. Responding affirmatively, he claimed, quote, I have never met a driver like you, unquote. I knew at that moment that despite having my CDL, I wasn't a driver. Despite wanting to be a mechanic, I wasn't a mechanic. I was simply on an adventure seeking growth and experience. The next week, I was invited on my next adventure as a dispatcher. Silver linings. Preparation for and working towards what is consciously desired in life often leads to manifesting that desire more than those we do not prepare for. Chapter titled, Hard Work and Self-Growth. The night dispatcher role was very much, quote, sink or swim, unquote. There was no onboarding or training. There was no manual or process for learning the role. I was to shadow another colleague for a few days and then be thrown right into the hot seat. Night dispatch directed all terminals and many national operations throughout after hours, creating bills of lading, tracking equipment, assigning equipment, monitor loading, deliveries, handling customer calls, and extinguishing logistical fires were all job duties. It was fast-paced, and the role operated 24/7, 365 without skipping a beat. There were commonly 2 to 3 calls on hold, with another call in and a few drivers waiting at the front desk. This role truly turned me into a multitasking master. Despite the tasking job, I still worked to grow, improve, and learn something new each day. I volunteered to cover holiday shifts. At one point during my night shift journey, I worked 27 days without a day off in conjunction with working 90-plus hour work weeks. Nonetheless, I still conquered 4 courses a semester and graduated with a 4.0 on my associate's degree. I was hungry and excited for all of the progress and potential in my life. In reality, I was a single father, working night shift, and attending community college. In my mind, I was a superhero with the most important job in the world. I may have been borderline delusional, but that delusion pushed me to conquer all obstacles. Within 6 months, I had developed a training manual for the role. I was promoted to transportation dispatcher, moved to day shift. I was given my own desk, my own terminal of drivers to dispatch all over the nation. It was much more of the same introduction. Trial by fire after shattering another colleague in the role. The zest and sense of adventure I brought to the new role never ceased. I learned as much as I could, and I always tried to improve my ability. I worked to help others to the best of my ability. always volunteering to take extra responsibility. I continued working the night desk as well when there were shorthanded, never turning down the opportunity to go above and beyond the normal call of duty. During this time, I missed the allure of the open road and an audiobook. I took up a part-time role driving a truck on Saturdays over the road. I would leave Saturday and spend the night in Indiana after delivering to a warehouse. My daughter also tagged along on several of these journeys. There isn't much that compares to family bonding on the road. Silver linings. I have found that consistently going above and beyond develops a reputation as a go-to among colleagues. This reputation can be very valuable in an organization and opens doors that might otherwise have been closed. Trust that those at the top of their class or office are getting attention, seen or unseen, from others. Go the extra mile. Okay, I know this episode has gone on longer than normal, but I'm trying to wrap up this book within 10 episodes, so the next two will probably be similar. That being said, let's go ahead and dive into some of the important topics we covered in this read-through. The Golden Rule. The Golden Rule always makes me think of the idea of karmic power or karma. It may not be seen at times, and at other times it may be seen undeniable, but more often than not, it would appear that what we receive is in correlation to what we give. We give time in our job, we receive a paycheck. We give love, we receive love, and so forth. The idea is not to give out to others or the world what you would not like to receive. Or, in another way, only give to others or the world that which you would want to receive. This rule is much easier to appreciate when you have experienced suffering yourself. Naturally, when you've gone through something painful, you're not going to want to inflict that same pain on somebody else. Practice gratitude regularly. There are few things as powerful as being truly thankful for all the good in our world. And interestingly enough, at least in my experience, when you focus on gratitude, you continue to discover more and more to be grateful for. Patience. Patience is another key trait to a powerful life. It was James Allen that said, "Calmness is power. It is one of the beautiful jewels of wisdom, the result of long and patient effort and self-control. Its presence is an indication of ripened experience." Always kill them with kindness. Own your personal attitude no matter what those around you and their attitudes try to do to impact yours. I have this little bracelet that I had custom made that I wear every day. On one side it has the initials IARFOSOB, meaning I am responsible for our state of being. And then on the other side it has the initials IARFMB, standing for I am responsible for my bliss. This reminds me constantly that only I get to choose my impact on others and the impact others have on myself. And always never forget, take everything with a grain of salt, just like putting a tire with no air in it underwater to see if it's going to bubble. Silly things are going to happen. Accept it, learn from it, laugh at it, and move forward. Never hesitate to invest in yourself, knowing that when you add monetary value to that investment, it is more likely that you're going to follow through with your commitment or get something valuable in return. Don't forget about no extra time, NET. Combine work with learning. Combine driving with learning. Try to add value to yourself in addition to anything that you are required to do or should be doing. And finally, always keep a piece of your inner child with you. Just like R in the story from the adult with disabilities home, when you can turn and generate any moment into a happy, grateful moment with energy, with imagination, just simply having unending gratitude, life is going to be so very powerful for you. And the best part is that no one can take that from you, but only you can give that to yourself. As always, this is Jake, signing off. And remember, when things are looking down, you always have the choice to stay up.